My brother sold my inheritance without telling me while I was at work. So I took legal action, and he lost everything he expected. I'm a 28-year-old guy. I always prided myself on being responsible and independent. I've never been the type to take shortcuts long hours at work, paying my own bills, saving every extra penny, and making sure my life had some semblance of order. My friends always said I was the stable one, the guy people could count on, and honestly, I liked that about myself. Lately, things were starting to feel like they were falling into place. I'd just started putting away a little extra money each month, thinking ahead. And my job was solid enough to dream about things like a small trip abroad or maybe one day settling down in a house of my own. Family-wise, it was complicated. My parents always had this soft spot for my older brother, Ryan. He could do no wrong in their eyes. While I was quietly expected to toe the line and keep everything together, I never minded too much. I assumed that as long as I stayed out of trouble and kept my head down, our relationship would be fine. Ryan, with his easy charm, had this knack for making everyone feel like he was genuinely trustworthy, and for the longest time, I believed it. I thought loyalty between brothers was unshakable. That family meant something deeper than petty mistakes. Part of that family trust included the small house my grandparents had left us. It wasn't much, but it was meaningful, a place that could be mine eventually, a small nest egg for the future. My parents had never outright said it was mine, but it was understood. Ryan always seemed relaxed about it, joking about how we could sell it if we ever needed cash. And I'd laugh it off, assuming he was just being his usual careless self. Still, there was a tiny knot in my stomach whenever he mentioned it, like an itch I couldn't quite scratch, a shadow beneath my confidence. At the time, I pushed it aside. I trusted him. I believed family meant honesty, and I thought the little house, like everything else we shared, was safe. I had no idea how wrong I was or how quickly that trust was about to be shattered. Things started off quietly. Nothing dramatic at first, but little red flags began to appear. Ryan would drop comments about the house when I wasn't expecting it. It's just sitting there doing nothing. Or maybe we should think about cashing in someday. At the time, I laughed it off, pretending not to notice the faint edge in his tone, telling myself I was overreacting. But each offhand remark left a weird knot in my chest. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in work and the routines that had always kept my life orderly. My job had become even more demanding lately, longer hours, more projects, and extra responsibilities. I liked being busy. It gave me a sense of control in a world that could feel messy, especially with my family. I told myself that while I was grinding away to secure my future, Ryan was just being Ryan, always charming, always careless, never malicious. I thought I had everything under control, that my life was predictable and safe. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Something about the way Ryan mentioned the house, it wasn't just casual. There was a subtle pride, like he already pictured some future without consulting me. And it made me uneasy in ways I couldn't quite put into words. I tried bringing it up once, lightly, as a joke. "Hey, don't go selling my inheritance while I'm at work, okay?" Ryan just smirked, waved his hand, and said, "Relax, bro. I'd never do anything like that." "Not yet, anyway," he laughed, and I forced a laugh too, pretending it was nothing. But that little "not yet" lingered in my mind. A whisper that grew louder every time he mentioned anything remotely related to money or the house. At home, atmosphere felt normal. Almost too normal, like nothing was wrong. But I could feel it, the subtle tension between trust and suspicion stretching thin, pulling tighter with every passing week. I had no idea that those little comments were the first pieces of a puzzle that would soon leave me blindsided. I'll never forget the day I found out. I was at work, buried in emails and conference calls, when my phone buzzed with a message from the real estate agent handling the house. At first, I thought it was just a routine update, maybe a minor question about paperwork. But the moment I read the first line, my stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd fallen through the floor. The message said the house had been sold. And not just that, but the check had been deposited and the paperwork was signed. My name was on the ownership documents, yet I had never signed anything. I blinked at the screen, thinking I was misunderstanding, that somehow there had to be a mistake. But there wasn't. There wasn't a mistake, and there wasn't a miscommunication. Ryan had sold it. Without telling me? Without asking? Without a shred of permission? I felt my hands shake, heart hammering against my chest, every nerve screaming betrayal. I wanted to run to the office bathroom, punch the wall, scream into a mirror, but I had to sit there, staring at my screen, trying to process what I had just been hit with. How could he? How could my own brother, the one I trusted more than anyone in this world, just take that from me? The small house wasn't just property. It was a symbol of years of hard work, a family legacy, of my quiet dreams for the future. And he'd sold it like it was nothing. It's like my trust didn't matter at all. When I confronted him that evening, hoping there was some ridiculous explanation, Ryan's first words were, "Relax, man. It's just business." I remember laughing bitterly, the sound hollow, echoing the betrayal I couldn't yet articulate. "Business," I said, voice shaking. "This was my inheritance, Ryan. How could you just sell it behind my back?" He shrugged, leaning back on the couch, that smug smirk I'd once trusted so easily still plastered across his face. "I figured it was time to move on," he said. And that's when it hit me. The brother I thought I knew was gone. Replaced by someone I barely recognized. I felt a cold, hollow rage settle in my chest, and in that moment, I knew things were about to get ugly. The confrontation only made everything worse. I couldn't believe how calm Ryan was, like he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "Relax, it's not a big deal," he said, lounging on the couch as if he'd just borrowed a cup of sugar instead of stealing my future. My chest felt tight, and my hands curled into fists, trembling with anger I could barely control. "Not a big deal?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "That was my inheritance. Something our grandparents worked their whole lives for. How could you do this?" Ryan leaned back even further, his smirk unshaken. "Come on, bro, you're always so uptight. It's just a house. Money comes and goes." His words were like knives, slicing through the trust I'd built in him for decades. I couldn't believe I was hearing this from my own brother. My parents naturally stepped in, trying to calm me down, but their words did nothing to help. "It's just business between you two. Don't make a scene," my dad said, shrugging. My mom nodded silently, eyes avoiding mine. That's when I realized it wasn't just Ryan who had betrayed me. My whole family had casually shrugged off my pain, as if it didn't matter. I felt a wave of isolation crash over me. For years, I had assumed loyalty and honesty were enough to keep me safe. That family was something unbreakable. But that illusion shattered in seconds. Every memory of shared birthdays, every trust I placed in him now felt like a lie. I was angry, hurt, and humiliated all at once. Sitting in my own living room, feeling more alone than I had in years, after he walked off, leaving me stewing in a mixture of disbelief and rage, I sank into a chair and stared at the floor. The house, my future, my dreams, it had all been stripped away in a single, careless act. And for the first time, I started thinking about what I could do legally, because it was clear that relying on family meant nothing. I knew I couldn't let him get away with this, but even as my mind raced through options, a small, terrifying thought crept in. What if this was just the beginning? I spent that night pacing my apartment, replaying every conversation, every joke Ryan had made about the house. "Not yet," he had said once, and now that tiny phrase felt like a sinister warning I'd ignored. I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't stop turning over the what-ifs, the ways he could get away with this if I didn't act fast. That's when I decided I wasn't going to sit here and let him erase years of trust and family legacy with a shrug and a smirk. I needed proof, and I needed a plan. The next morning, I started digging. Emails, contracts, bank statements, anything that could show I had legal claim to the property. I called the real estate agent again, pressing for details, noting how the house had been sold under Ryan's name, with signatures I hadn't given. Every piece of evidence felt like a spark, lighting up the path I needed to take. But the more I uncovered, the angrier I got, and the more I realized the depth of Ryan's deception. He hadn't just sold the house. He had done it in a way that made it seem entirely legitimate. Hiding the profits and attempting to cover his tracks, that's when the midpoint twist hit me like a punch to the gut. I discovered that he had set up a separate account for the sale proceeds, one that even our parents didn't know about. He'd planned this from the start, and the audacity made my blood boil. All those casual comments, all that charm, it had been a mask for something calculated and cruel. I remember sitting back in my chair, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white, feeling this mix of disbelief and determination. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, about respect, about finally standing up for myself against someone I had trusted with everything. I knew what I had to do next, but as I looked at the pile of evidence, another thought hit, me a thought that made my stomach drop even further. What if Ryan wasn't done yet? Over the next few days, I became obsessed with gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. Emails, text messages, financial statements. I left no stone unturned. I even reached out to a family friend who had helped Ryan with minor property deals in the past. At first, they were hesitant, almost afraid, but once I explained the situation, they quietly confirmed my worst fears. Ryan had a history of shady dealings and had always skirted rules when it benefited him. The confirmation made my blood boil, but it also strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for justice. Sitting at my desk late one night, I spread the papers and files in front of me. The soft hum of the apartment around me, the city lights casting long shadows on the walls. Every detail I uncovered painted a picture of how methodical Ryan had been. He had forged signatures, used fake documents, and even tried to launder the sale proceeds through accounts no one in the family knew existed. The realization hit me hard. I was up against someone who had calculated every move. Someone who had thought he could get away with betraying me completely. My hands shook, and I had to take a deep breath. The fear was their fear of losing everything, fear of taking on my own brother, fear that our parents might turn against me, but I also felt something else, a strange, empowering clarity. I wasn't going to let this slide. I contacted a lawyer the next morning, explaining the situation in meticulous detail. She listened, nodded, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. The plan was clear: document, prove, and prepare for legal action. Ryan's casual confidence wouldn't hold up against facts, evidence, and the law. But as I filed away the last of the papers and stared at my laptop, a new anxiety crept in. What if he tried to fight back first, to manipulate the situation before I could move? The thought made my stomach tighten. I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a battle over a house anymore, it was a war, and I had to win. The first signs of Ryan's counterattack came faster than I expected. Within a week of filing the preliminary papers, rumors started circulating through the family. He was telling anyone who would listen that I was overreacting, that I was exaggerating, that this was just business and I was making a mountain out of a molehill. My parents, always the peacemakers, seemed torn. Part of them believed me, part of them wanted to avoid confrontation. Even some distant relatives whispered doubts, and I felt my confidence waver for the first time. Then came the call from my lawyer. Ryan had filed his own motions, trying to discredit me. He claimed I had no standing, that the house had been a joint decision, and that I'd somehow consented. I remember sitting in my apartment, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. My vision blurred. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. For the first time, I questioned whether I could actually win this. I had all the evidence, all the proof, but facing my own brother's manipulation in a courtroom. It was terrifying. I sank into my chair, head in my hands, the weight of betrayal and hopelessness pressing down on me. All those years of trust, the loyalty I had assumed was mutual, now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't understand how someone could be so cold, so calculating, so willing to turn family against me for a quick gain. My hands shook, and I felt a hollowness I've rarely experienced a deep, gnawing fear that maybe, just maybe, I'd lost not only the house, but my family, my dignity, and my sense of security all at once. And yet, even in that darkest moment, a small ember of determination burned. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could control what happened next. I swore to myself then, as I sat alone with the weight of the world on my shoulders. Ryan might have started this fight, but I would finish it, and he wouldn't see it coming. Court day arrived faster than I expected, And I remember walking into that courtroom feeling like every step echoed my anger and fear. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old leather, a mix that somehow made everything feel heavier. Ryan was there, of course, dressed in a sharp suit, looking calm and collected, like this was some casual game he could win with charm. I wanted to scream at him, shake him, make him understand how completely he'd underestimated me, but instead, I focused on the evidence spread across my lawyer's table. Each document a tangible reminder that I wasn't powerless anymore. The sessions dragged on. Each day, each argument, each motion felt like a war of attrition. Ryan's lawyer twisted words, tried to paint me as obsessive, as if my outrage over betrayal made me unstable. I had to keep myself grounded, reminding myself that the facts were on my side. The emails, the contracts, the trail of his deception, it all pointed to the same truth. He had sold the house without my consent, attempting to cover it up at every turn. And now, the entire courtroom was going to see it. My parents sat in the gallery, faces unreadable. Part of me wished they would look at Ryan the way I saw him, the way the evidence showed him to be reckless, manipulative, and selfish. But some part of me knew family loyalties ran deep, that their disappointment would be tempered by years of favoritism and habit. I felt a mix of frustration and resolve. This wasn't about them. This was about reclaiming what was mine and exposing the lies Ryan had buried beneath his charm by the end of the day. I was exhausted, mentally drained, but strangely exhilarated. Every witness, every piece of evidence presented made it harder for Ryan to wiggle out. Yet as I left the courtroom and felt the night air cool against my skin, I couldn't shake a gnawing anxiety. I knew Ryan wouldn't go down without a fight, and the next steps could bring something I hadn't anticipated, something that might change the entire game, just when I thought I had a handle on the situation. The unexpected hit me like a punch to the gut. During one of the court sessions, my lawyer uncovered something Ryan hadn't counted on: forged documents. He had tried to make it look like I had signed off on the sale, had even fabricated a few emails to cover his tracks. I remember sitting in the gallery, heart hammering, as the judge examined the evidence, flipping through pages that proved beyond doubt that my brother had lied, manipulated, and cheated. The courtroom went quiet, everyone sensing the shift. Even Ryan's smirk faltered just slightly. Like a crack in the armor I'd been itching to see, the betrayal felt heavier than ever. Not only had he sold my inheritance, but he had tried to frame me, to make it seem like I was the one at fault. I felt a surge of vindicated rage, mixed with exhaustion and disbelief. My hands clenched the edges of my chair, nails digging in, and I could barely breathe as the weight of years of family favoritism and deception pressed down on me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about years of trust and loyalty, being twisted into something unrecognizable. Even my parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The proof was undeniable. Ryan had crossed a line that could no longer be ignored, and the reality of his recklessness hit them as hard as it hit me. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, knowing the scales of justice were tipping. But I also realized the next steps would be intense. Ryan wasn't going to surrender quietly. He would fight, manipulate, and attempt to salvage whatever he could. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. I knew the climax of this battle was approaching. Ryan had underestimated me, and now, with his lies exposed, he had no idea what was coming. I clenched my fists, heart pounding, and silently vowed, the next time I faced him, we'd see just how wrong he had been. Judgment Day felt surreal. I walked into the courtroom feeling the weight of everything: the betrayal, the late nights gathering evidence, the gnawing fear that Ryan might somehow slip through the cracks. The air smelled of polished wood and paper, but it carried an electric tension that made my stomach twist. Ryan sat there, still trying to wear that calm, smug expression. But this time, it felt brittle, like the mask was finally starting to crack. I couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the way the judge scanned the evidence. The pause as she flipped through the documents I had painstakingly compiled. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Every word felt like a drumbeat in my chest. Ryan had lost. The house was mine. All the claims he had tried to fabricate, the forged emails, The falsified contract sit was all dismissed, his attempts to deceive the court exposed for everyone to see. I felt a rush of vindication, a surge of relief that I had been seeking for weeks. I had been right to trust the evidence, to trust myself, to refuse to let him bully or manipulate the truth. I caught Ryan's expression in that moment, and it was a mix of shock, disbelief, and humiliation. He hadn't anticipated losing, not like this, not publicly. The same brother who once made me laugh and confided in me now looked like a stranger, stripped of the arrogance he had wielded so casually. For the first time I realized how deep his greed ran, and how carefully he had plotted to get away with it. The emotional release hit me then. I could feel the years of resentment, the subtle favoritism, and the betrayal wash over me. And I finally allowed myself to breathe. The house, my inheritance, my future, it was mine. Reclaimed not just through legal action, but through proving that I wouldn't let family betrayal define me. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the sunlight hitting my face, I knew one thing. Ryan had underestimated me completely. And this was only the beginning of me taking control of my life on my terms. The days after the verdict were surreal. Walking into the house for the first time since the legal battle felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that Ryan had tried to erase. Every creaking floorboard, every faded corner, suddenly carried a new weight. This wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of justice, of standing up for myself when no one else would. I spent hours just walking through the rooms, imagining all the plans I'd had before Ryan tried to take them from me, and feeling a quiet satisfaction that I had finally preserved them. Family dynamics shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. My parents were awkward at best, guilty at worst. They didn't know whether to scold Ryan or try to repair their relationship with me. Distant relatives whispered behind hands and doors, unsure how to navigate the fallout. Some of them looked at me differently, perhaps with newfound respect, or maybe with discomfort at how firmly I had defended what was mine. It was strange, realizing that the ripple effect of one betrayal had reached so far. And yet there was a strange sense of closure beginning to settle. Emotionally, I was a mess. Relief, satisfaction, exhaustion, and lingering anger mingled inside me. I reflected on the years of favoritism, the subtle ways Ryan had been given leeway while I had to stay in line. It was painful to admit, but I finally understood that my value wasn't defined by his manipulation or my parents' biases. The experience had carved out a space inside me for self-respect and assertiveness I hadn't fully embraced before. I also realized the house wasn't just property, was proof that standing up for yourself, even against someone you love, can change everything. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted empowerment. I could finally move forward knowing I had the strength to protect what was mine, legally and morally. But even with the victory, there was a lingering thought I couldn't shake. Ryan had lost the battle, but the war of trust within our family, that might never be fully won. Finally, it felt like I could breathe. The house was mine, the legal battle behind me, and for the first time in months, the weight pressing on my chest began to lift. Walking through the rooms, touching the surfaces my grandparents had once walked on, I felt a strange mix of relief, triumph, and quiet sadness. It wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming my life, my trust, and my sense of self that Ryan had tried to steal with every calculated move. I took my time organizing the place, turning it into something I could finally call my own. Each small decision, what to keep, what to fix, even what paint to use, felt like an act of reclaiming not just the house, but my autonomy. I thought about Ryan, about everything he had done, and for a moment, I felt a flash of anger. But then I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. Justice had been served in the courtroom, and the law had made sure he wouldn't profit from his betrayal. That was enough. The family dynamic was still complicated. My parents were quieter now, the favoritism laid bare in ways that couldn't be ignored. Some relatives kept their distance, others offered awkward congratulations. It was messy, but I no longer felt the need to prove myself to them. I had proven it to myself, and that was what mattered. I was no longer the one being walked over, dismissed, or underestimated. Sitting on the porch that evening, the sun dipping behind the rooftops, I finally allowed myself to reflect on everything. Betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also taught me resilience, strategy, and self-worth. I realized that empowerment didn't come from winning a fight alone. It came from standing firm, making choices with clarity, and refusing to let manipulation define your path. Ryan had lost everything he thought he could take from me. And me? I had gained far more than a house. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and the knowledge that no one, not even family, could take those away.